afternoon. Looks like everything's working okay, but as per usual, you've got to start telling me that it is. I know that the audio has been a little bit glitchy at times this week, but many of you have been able to help me refine that. End of last year, I'd said about how I was going to stop asking that and stop coming onto the show all paranoid about whether or not it's working, but there's been enough glitches and tech issues and stuff that I just can't help myself. So if you are listening in live early doors and you need to let me know that the sound's working okay, then wherever it is that you're finding me, then please do let me know. And it stops me potentially talking into the ether and people not hearing me. For those that don't know, if you're coming across this for the first time, I'm Jack Chew. This is Chewing It Over, and we discuss all things topical and current in the industry at between 12:30 and 1 o'clock on weekdays. And on Friday shows, it tends to be a slightly different vibe, especially if I'm on my own, of which I am today. And I want to sometimes take from a list of things you've asked me to talk about. And one of the things that keeps coming up on various shows, it came up on Monday, and it came up on Thursday last week, and questions that you guys send all the time about the inherent value of clinicians, of physiotherapists, of osteopaths, of chiropractors, of MSK therapists, of different persuasions, of the profession that they happen to represent, or the industry at large, how we are valued in society, how we are valued as individuals. And so therefore, I want to just riff on that a little bit, right, and talk to you guys about it, because it's something that just keeps coming up, keeps coming back around. So yeah, hopefully the signal seems stable, and I've had a couple of texts now saying that that you can hear me okay. But if there's any problems, then please let me know in the chat function. Let me know that you can hear okay, and let me know that this is all working and the stream is clean. Because I think there's a few reasons as to why I wanted to do this now. It's been on the list for a little while, but there's a few different things, and there's a business angle to what I'll be talking about as well with regards to value. It's just a super important thing for us to consider as to sometimes the misnomers that occur in our industry as to what people's price point is, right? So that might be in private practice, people like, what is it that you charge for your time, for what particular services? But then also there's, if you get your pay slip, you're in the NHS and you've got your pay slip, you get pay slip elsewhere, of course, but I just mean like in the NHS, because you might not be thinking necessarily about inherent value on time, but you have an hourly rate, right? It is delineated by that. Typically you think in salary terms, and that's totally reasonable and appropriate across sectors, but in private practice, you're kind of confronted with what you're charging people for, and then also what of that you take. Especially if you're an associate therapist, you might take a percentage of what it is you might charge to patients as a self-employed basis. You might be then salaried, but generally there's a more implicit understanding of value sometimes in the private sector than there is in the public sector. But then in the public sector, there's no less issue with that, with regards to the atmosphere of how well valued we are as individuals, and therefore remunerated sometimes for that, because this word value is an interesting one in the English language. Those that know me enough know that I'm a bit of a sado for language. And when we think about value, sometimes that can be almost as a financial thing. We think about value, but we also then, our inherent value, our inherent worth is sometimes a more personalized way of using that word. And so I'm talking about all of those things because they are implicitly linked, right? And remuneration is one way of sometimes valuing a transaction, but it's also something that the social value means a lot. And I hear a lot from you guys about that. In the public sector, especially, it's that people are saying that it's not well valued in society. We're not getting the respect that is deserved from Joe Public about what we do and how we do it and what we mean and how we contribute. And that is something that is in tension with sometimes that people are often in a position where they are, we see the evidence all the time of people recognizing the value add that people bring to people's lives by getting them involved in rehabilitation, getting them to do things they otherwise couldn't, really changing their lives in meaningful ways. And the stories that come from that. But it's hard for us because we can't measure it really tangibly. Like what is the social respect for the MSK professions and industries? It's nebulous, isn't it? So on a you get a few testimonial bad examples. You kind of get some it's getting a bad name, or it's in the mainstream media about the fact that there's been something that's occurred that's made us look bad. it can sometimes therefore feel like actually, yeah, we're undervalued, people underappreciating it. We look at average salary across a profession and compare it to something else that might be apples and oranges, but generally speaking, you're thinking, bloody hell, should have been an accountant, or whatever. I should have been a plumber. You hear about this all the time, and understandable. People then thinking like, I am paid less or I am valued less in society than I could have been elsewhere, and my skill set could have been applied elsewhere. My knowledge could be applied elsewhere through a different channel, and therefore be either remunerated or valued in other ways differently. And so that is just a massive deluge of that style of questioning that comes in, or people inviting me to comment on those things. And they never say, can you do a podcast on value? It's usually that I'm admittedly translating it as being, that is at the heart of a lot of this stuff. And it came up on Monday, right? So Andrew Walton and Simon Devane from the MSKPN, they came on, and one of the things that came up is this idea that, and they hear it like I do, is that people are saying, we're not paid enough per unit time, or that we're not respected by Joe Blogs for recognizing just what it is we can do, compared to, say, insert other profession, particularly in the medical profession, say, is that there's sort of a social status that comes with that. Or if you mention to someone, oh, I'm a physiotherapist, that they have a good comprehension of just what it is that we do. And there's an irritation by many people for the fact that that is under recognized and under respected. And so it was then they were talking about some of the things that they feel need to happen to improve that. And I definitely want to sort of talk on some of those. What I want to ask you, though, if you're tuning into this live, and you know what it's like, especially on a Friday show, those of you that are not here for the first time, is that I really do want to get you involved, even more than usual. I want to chew this over with you. And I therefore want to ask you a direct question. What do you understand of value? Do you feel, it's a few questions typical for me, but yeah, the main one is, do you feel that you are valued? And how then, if you do try to, if I insisted that you tried to measure that, how would you measure it? And on what metric do you feel valued or not? And that can be like on your salary, it can be on your hourly rate, it can be on your, that social value and respect. How do you feel about that? And I really do come at this without prejudice, really. I've been hearing from a lot of you about the fact that you feel undervalued, granted. But I also sometimes hear from people, especially in more adjacent non-clinical sectors, that sometimes feel like, yeah, I never thought I'd make this much money from X. Those that have moved upstairs in various different places, including in the NHS. Yeah, I'm on a salary that I didn't expect to be at. And sometimes they then think that that is an overvaluing, and I'm often disagreeing with them and saying, you're doing great work and you deserve that figure. But that's why I'm inviting that to you if you're listening live, is that how valued do you feel, and by what metric would you measure that? So I'm just going to leave that with you and riff on this for a little longer and bring you guys in. But I do want you involved in this particular topic, because it's something that I'm trying to do this because of me spotting commonalities of questions and themes. When we've asked what do people want us to cover, this comes up. Now I'm just going to talk about business for a second. On Wednesday morning, I met up with some ex-bosses of mine, phenomenal thinkers. They are in the vehicle management industry, lease sales. And I worked for them, with them when I was 16, between 16 and 18. It's what funded uni for me, really. I think maybe I was 17, 18. Just brilliant entrepreneurs and people. And I was catching up with them because I was dropping my kids off back with my parents. Not a euphemism, by the way. If you're appropriately northern, you'd know dropping the kids off as being a euphemism for going to the loo. That's not what I'm meaning. No, I was literally dropping my children off at my parents' house in Fulridge, and then the town neighbouring that was where I worked with them. And so it was brilliant for me. I wanted to try and pick their brains on some business advice stuff, and nicked a bit of their time they were really generous with. Now, the reason I'm bringing that back up is because what they've done and continue to encourage me to do is that to recognize the difference between just productizing things and the actual value that you can add to someone. And the difference in their game is that there's simple ways in which you can just get someone a vehicle. If they want a vehicle, you get them a vehicle. Whereas if you then, that person, yeah, they might be able to find it cheaper elsewhere, but essentially if they also then have to faff around with everything, if the systems aren't necessarily very complete, if the person that they're working with isn't a trusted advisor that they can know that he's going to have their backs, if they recognize that everything else associated to that vehicle they're going to have to sort themselves, and that draws down on their time. Essentially, yeah, they might have paid a little bit less for the actual vehicle, but essentially they've then had to commit an awful load of time around it. And therefore it's so clumsy to race to the bottom, and to therefore compromise the product of which you deliver or the service of which you deliver based on the fact that, yes, just because it can be delivered cheaply elsewhere doesn't mean you should just succumb to that, and recognize what it is that you're doing that's slightly different. And recognize as well that it's not up to you necessarily to work out what your worth is, right? This is where people are really clumsy in recognizing the importance of understanding market forces. What people are willing to pay you for things is something that is an interesting phenomenon that's been studied to high heaven and needs to be understood by people better than it is. And I'm not saying I've got the answer to this, but I'm just meaning that the fact that there's so many different things affecting that transaction. And I'm talking about the financial concept of value here in a narrow sense, but it's intimately linked to the sense of value, which is a more nebulous term, including on that personal stuff we just talked about briefly before. But if you're delivering, let's just say that you're delivering a point of care, someone comes in with a sore knee and you are then trying to help them with it. They're consulting you to try to help them with it. And obviously within a sensible rehabilitation model, you're empowering them to overcome this and to understand their body better when they've done with you than when they came in. But to think of that as just being a unit of time that you're selling your labor and expertise on, it's so clumsy. And it therefore then it leads to an inherent undervaluing, in my opinion. What you should be doing is you should be factoring those things in, but then you should also be understanding the sort of circumstances, the parameters, the location of which they're seeing you, the timeliness of which you're going to be able to help them, just how much that might mean to them to be able to see you promptly and for you to have the time to actually spend with them, for them to not have to compromise on what might be that everyone in the elephant in the room in that interaction is that there's a few different things that could be done better, but we can't change it because that's the system and that's the nature of the large beast that can sometimes be a bureaucracy that might stop people being able to be agile with just exactly how they could personalize that interaction. And I'm talking about things before they've even got there. And then all of those things that if they didn't exist, if they didn't surround that interaction, then that person is often then needing to do that themselves. They're actually doing the emotional labor and spending some of their time trying to problem solve other factors affecting and around their lives, because they are concerned about the fact that this problem, this knee pain that I've just described, is something that is going to have ongoing consequences elsewhere in their lives. And so a quality therapist that then helps to put someone at ease in such a way that helps them realize that through whatever treatment plan that might be made, is going to help to be a trusted advisor in that person's life to help them scale their function from where they are to where they want to get to. And the sequelae of them resolving that problem is sometimes very complex psychosocial stuff that could then really help them lift out of various different challenges. If that then means that unlocks their ability to sell their labor on the open market more capably as well. If there's someone that were otherwise thinking that they needed to go part-time, I've had this recently, someone that's had to go part-time working on a checkout at Sainsbury's because of their MSK problem, and you're helping to resolve it, makes them realize that they've probably put a limitation on themselves there that was going to otherwise really strain them financially, that they don't no longer need to. Their body isn't packing in as much as they thought it was. It's not up to you to work out what that is, right? That value to that person, it just isn't up to you. That's the interesting thing when it comes to market forces. And then this is one of the things that's interesting in our game, is because we've got such a large public sector within the NHS that sometimes then means that variable I'm just describing, where you'd think that then if you're adding that incredible intense value to someone's life and they're willing to pay for it, then that's only going to just drive up the valuation of that profession and the professionals within it, and they can therefore charge an ongoing rate. That gets affected somewhat by the public sector. You know, there's no market forces operating quite as overtly on those transactions. So then what you need to do is you need to make sure that when we're doing what I've just described with that person, by the way, it's happening, you know, as much, if not more, especially in terms of volume, in the NHS, right? The quality, life-changing delivery, and the economic consequence in my example of it's happening all the time in the NHS. That person given a double-handed handshake on a service that was free at the point of contact means that there isn't a mechanism for them to then think, I would have paid £100 an hour for this. So what you need to then do as an industry is we need to make the case through outcomes, through patient-reported experience measures as well, make the case for the fact that people's lives are being so enriched by these interventions in such a way that then can make an appropriate case for that to be valued in such a way that the hourly rates of, say, NHS professionals that aren't necessarily tethered to individual consumers like they are in the private sector. You need to sometimes do a little bit more work to prove worth. But one of the things that came up on Monday is that if, whilst having that conversation, think, well, how do we prove worth? We measure quality outcomes, we measure quality experiences, we try and develop some consistency so people can understand that that brand, that reputation, that expectation starts to become a bit more accurate. What do people expect? What do they get? There's consistency that's required for that. And then it means that when people like me start saying that any inconsistencies that deviate too far from the mean delivery of care, in terms of the styles of practice, but also the quality of practice. And if there's people that are then dragging those standards, if there are people that are then selling themselves too cheap, but also if there are people that are delivering care that's outside of what would be a respected, evidence-informed manner, it's just, you know, really left field stuff, then it's something that is going to have a drag effect on that value. And so the pretensions that, and then the nature of how complex it is to try and have the conversations that would truly unlock some of that and to drive up value gets spoiled by people thinking that you can try and have your cake and eat it too. You can drive up the sense of societal value. You can increase the hourly rates that can be charged for it across sector, but without cleaning up our shop, right? Without tidying things up, without recognizing that there are sometimes individuals or groups or styles of care that have been delivered that are of low to no clinical value, that don't necessarily contribute, as I just described it, to those enriching experiences that patients have that really do make people, you know, their eyebrows raise as to just how startling that's been for them as an intervention that they would have been willing to pay for, and that they want the NHS to fund more, and therefore that then means that there can be a premium that is charged on that style of care. It's that it doesn't just come for it just doesn't come for the ride. Like, it's just naive to think that you can just shake your fist and whinge about it and just say, oh, I just think we should be better valued. It's like, no, you just can't. It's not, you know, maybe it's a cosmic injustice. You know, maybe it is. Maybe it's just like, that's just the way the cookie has crumbled and it's unlucky. But maybe we're not proving it. What about that? What about because some of those market mechanisms that I was just describing that could make it very easy for me to put my prices up if I was doing that, right? Clinically, if I was knocking people's socks off in my community and they were coming back and saying, oh my God, my mates have had their lives changed by you and I'm therefore willing to pay a premium for you to do the same for me, then it's just an obvious thing that I could do. Okay? You can put the price up, people are willing to pay them, and you're delivering quality ethical care within the parameters of sensible science, then, you know, crack on. It's kind of obvious. Just because those mechanisms don't play quite as cleanly in the public sector, which obviously then, you know, there's something really relevant to how, you know, the public perception rates, you know, those things aren't uncoupled, of course. You know, the market is affected quite greatly by the market share, especially when it comes to workforce. You can think about the fact that, you know, how much someone can get at at NHS pay. That's a massive knock-on effect on comparison analyses to all different parts of sport and private and charity sectors and stuff. So I'm not trying to untether those, but I'm just meaning that just because it's less obvious doesn't mean we can't use some of the same principles to actually then justify our value. And one of the things that people are really happy to talk about then is just like, let's champion all the good news. It's like, if you just do that naively and not point out the crap that can completely, I'm mixing my metaphors now, but just completely poison the well, right? Only takes, if someone gives me 10 litres of water, but then pours a litre of piss into it, then essentially you're still corrupting it. You're still corrupting that whole, yeah? Unfortunately, it can spread that way. Unfortunately, that's the way that reputation management works. And that can work on the macro, on a professional level as well. So when it comes to your value, you've got to justify it. And you've got to recognize that sometimes you've got to understand not just what is good, but also what is corrupting the reputation that can help us to lift value. And that's why people like me, you'll talk about stuff like this, but then we'll also do clinical work and try and offer a style of practice that we prove. We offer all sorts of different things educationally, of course, to try and raise clinical standards. But then you also see us flex into policy through things like MSKR, because we realize that fundamentally we can't just keep shaking our fist and championing the good and making critiques of certain things. You've got to then try to drive for sensible reforms that could help us to then bake that in and create a social value that then might remunerate people more appropriately. Because I agree, I think we are. If I answer my own question, I think we are undervalued. And I think there's a way by every metric. And one of those metrics being, yes, we're underpaid. We're underpaid. And it's something that just, it's utter political and economic naivety to think that if we're underpaid, then we should just lobby for more pay. It's just like, oh, piss off. It's honestly child's game, that. Really kind of, you can see I'm a bit irritated by it when I think about that. Not irritated by the whole topic. I love this topic and I'm getting a bit mopey, but I hate that attitude, I guess. I just think it honestly, it reminds me of sort of student politics in a sense. Like, you just naively think that that's how the world works. It's like, well, if there's an injustice in pay differential, then we should just correct that by saying pay us more. Oh. Grow up. It's not cool. And that is often the thing that bothers me most, is that is really sometimes disrupting people's sense of inherent value. So we're talking about financial value on various different things here. And I mentioned about how interesting the word value is that stuff I've just talked about, and I'm hearing from you all the time, is that is also then meaning that you're losing a sense of value for you as a person, a sense of worth. And it's dragging people towards things like burnout, or it's making people, even if they're not necessarily burnt out, they're just kind of looking and thinking, is there a better use of my time? Or is this system that I'm working within not allowing me to flourish, not allowing me to deliver the care that I need to my patients, to do the things that I've just described? And what Jess just described there is exactly how I want to practice. I want to change people's lives like that, but the system is stopping me doing that. That is having a drag effect on people's sense of value and sense of worth as a person. And it's why it's an interesting thing in concept is value, quite nebulous, is that they're all integrated. And I don't think you solve one without solving the other. And it's the reason that I get spread so thin across my different ventures. And why the hell is he doing this MSKR thing now? It's because it's a better apparatus for us to instigate change in that area. Why is he talking about what's Therapy Live doing different to Physio Matters? What's Choose Health doing? Why even bother having a clinical business if you're doing all this stuff? It's like, because they're different avenues to be able to initiate the positive changes and reforms that can help improve healthcare in this country. And one of the ways in which we can do that is with a really empowered and valued workforce that then recognize that is the key variable that will help to drive those changes and to treat the patients and to improve the health of society. It's romantic, it's not easy, but no one said it was easy. Well, some people are saying it's easy, aren't they? Some people are just thinking if you shake your fist in the right direction, then it'll all get solved. But yeah, it just feels like utter nonsense, if I'm honest. So let's have a little look what comments we've been having. So Joe, this is Joe commenting probably when I asked the question, bloody what feels like an hour ago. She said, I find that I'm most highly valued by others for things which in my mind come naturally. Ability to relate, see the heart of things quickly, for example. It's taken me a long time to realize that just because I find it natural and easy doesn't mean, what you lot like with your long comments, I can't read them all. Doesn't mean it has no value. Yes, it's something that's easy to take for granted, isn't it? If it comes naturally to you, therefore undervalue it and think it's something that, well, if it's easy, therefore it's not valuable. It's ridiculous. It might be easy for you and not for others. But also, this is what, Joe, I hope you can understand that where I think it was maybe after you probably posted this as well, that it's not up to you. That's the thing. It sounds really silly, but I want you to value yourselves and to develop a self-worth and self-esteem and stuff, right? Massively. But also, I just can't for a second think that it feels navel-gazy to think that it's only you that can determine your value. It's like, no, you trade it. And that's why it's interesting on an economic level as well. Michael Schumacher, that'd be interesting. Let's see what he's got to say. Coming at it from, this is Michael, who works for HMVG, who's our marketing partner, my partner in crime with Therapy Live, who's also posted a awkwardly formatted comment here, so I'll try my best to read it. But if you want to see a top stylist, you pay 500 quid, a trainee 50 quid. This applies to almost every industry. Why do so many clinics charge the same price for all clinicians? And the issue in the industry is it's dated pricing models, first appointment, second appointment. And then it's really hard for me to read the rest of it, Michael, so I'm not going to. And you need to bloody learn your lesson. If you're going to put such thoughtful comments onto the stream, you've got to do them in little chunks so that I can post them up on the screen. That would be nice. But yeah, I appreciate his point. I want to reflect on it as well, though, because it's a really good one, is that that's in, in the private practice model, it just sort of makes sense. And I think that one of the reasons why, we don't delineate price like that, is often because of the legacy of the the fact that in the NHS, it's the services build their model and structure based on a skill mix, and then it's the patient coming in and seeing those people. They could see any of them, and it's kind of all baked in, really. So, and that's the nature of the public sector, full stop. Never mind, not just in health, they do the sums beforehand, and then it's free at the point of access. Whereas in private practice, there's no reason why you can't delineate your prices based on experience, etc., and who your top people are, and then also create those market forces as well. Ollie Coburn seems to have challenged me with something here. He's asked me to pretend something, so I'm putting it up on screen. I haven't read the whole thing. But he said, pretend for a second you're not a clinician. You have knee pain, you decide to go self-funded private. How much you'd be willing to shell out in total for the resolution of your knee pain? Is what you'd be willing to or able to pay commensurate, great word, but yeah, can't read it. Here we go. Commensurate with the value. Sometimes when I ponder this, I think what I'd be happy shelling out or able to is actually less than what some are charging. Big emphasis on some. Oh, that's interesting. Really, I didn't know you were going to conclude that way, Ollie. Then, but depending on the problem that I have, and this is one of the things I always ask patients when they come in, is that I say, just out of interest, and it doesn't affect my interest in this case, but is this something that is limiting you, or is it just annoying you? And the reason I ask that question is because it kind of speaks to what Ollie's on about there. Is that how valuable would a resolution of this be to you? Because it helps me to suss out mainly just how disruptive is my suggested resolution to this. How tolerable is that going to be for you? You're going to think, well, to resolve it, because sometimes people come in with sort of aches and pains and grumbles where you think, to resolve this, it's not just sort of a quick fix. This is something that you probably need to make some changes to your lifestyle or something. So, but if it's annoying them slightly, then they're less likely to make those wholesale changes. They're like, I like my life as it is. No, piss off. I just hoped you could rub it better rather than do squats with you for a few weeks. So to answer Ollie's question, I actually find that in the most part, especially because I see a subset of patients, perhaps, in the complex stuff, is that if I presented with those sorts of knee pains that come to me, honestly, to resolve those sorts of things and the ways that they're often tying people's lives up, thousands of pounds, well worth thousands of pounds. Yeah. And especially if that was to stop me being able to, if something was to, it's hard to think of it, isn't it? But say I developed a problem that stopped me being able to sit here and do this sort of stuff, or to broadcast, or to, for some reason I was, or I had a complex fatigue problem that stopped me being able to work my silly shifts that I do, and to therefore be the showman that I love to be on my education business. You think about what I would pay to resolve that. It's a sensible investment in my own health to pay it in order to unlock my own financial potential. That's that interesting thing about all these different factors affecting value. And so, whilst I respect, of course, that Ollie will be able to bring examples to bear whereby that may well be, higher in some, I find actually, I think there's a chronic undervaluing on much of it. What else? Sorry, it just glitched there. I'm struggling to get all the comments up. Here we go. So, Helen Preston said, great topic. It relates to how you value yourself. Yeah, thanks, Helen. I find that to be one of the most challenging things on this, is that you can't really talk about it all in one, but it was all interlinked, isn't it? Like self-value, self-worth, and then chargeable value, then you haven't got that. You can't do that in the NHS necessarily, but it's still inherent, isn't it, to it, and how you're perceived, how as a person you're perceived, and how the profession's perceived, and how the profession is valued. Whew, it's complex, and that's one of the reasons, like I said, that it's a complex problem. It does need some complex solutions. We try and simplify as best we can, but it's challenging. Karen Lay, thanks, Karen, former guest, of course. I'm chewing it over. That's the key variable on Karen's CV. No, she's the chair of Physio First. Wonderful lady and friend of the show. She said, describing value is always difficult to me, a lot based on trust. Delivering a good result for patients means they will return with another issue because you've gained their trust, sharing your expertise. The lifetime value of a patient, yes, very much a sensible sort of business concept for people to get their heads around. But something that I think we then miss is that, and I get why, we're kind of concerned about the fact that if a patient's representing all the time with the same problem and you're not resolving it, but you've kind of managed to bullshit them that that's normal, then in some cases, then that's a shame, because your relationship's good. You've kind of added value to their life as a person, but then it's also somewhat misleading them that it turns out there probably is someone next door that's would do a better job of fixing their knee up. That's one of the hard things about it, is that sometimes it can get a bit squiffy there. Kelly Clinton has said, I struggle with this a lot. So many clients I speak to say they don't have the disposable income to afford the care they need, but the care via the NHS and MSK is limited. Yeah, it's a massive conundrum, isn't it, Kelly? I think, and it also pulls on your heartstrings, doesn't it? So if your rates are beyond what they can afford, then yeah, it's a massive tough one, isn't it? I've heard some clinics doing really innovative things for those sorts of things, and having circumstances in which people can sometimes qualify for some support, even when there's cases like that. Ideally, in the way that things are in this country, of which I support, by the way, I want free at the point of access healthcare as an appropriate safety net. Is that it should be more accessible and certainly shouldn't be limited. And the way that things are at the moment, we're kind of between a rock and a hard place, whereby you've not got that access to that free care, but then you also have people that perceive then, because they're having to pay twice. If someone comes to see me, they hurt their knee, and they're coming to see me within a week, because the waiting list 18 weeks or something in the NHS, and they, I feel gutted, really, because especially when it's something that they're not even, especially if they're not coming to see me because it's me, or coming to us because they really want to come and see us. They just need to see someone, and ideally they'd have seen the NHS, but they just can't, and they need help. I'm proper gutted for them, because they've paid for that with their tax, right? They're paying twice, aren't they? Right? We all pay for the health service, and it's a shame when it's not there for us when we need it. And so, those are variables that, as a clinician, Kelly, I just hold my hands up to them and say, look, I'd love to change the politics, and I would, but unfortunately, yeah, that's the nature of the beast at the moment. And so you just got to be straight with them, and you make sure you can't undervalue yourself based on their income. It's something that would be unfair and prejudiced of you to make any guesses in that direction. So whilst yes, it's uncomfortable sometimes, I do think it's something that really we need to stand firm on with regards to that sense of our own inherent value. Ollie has then, as this a follow-up from what we've just said. So what about folk who can't afford the thousands, etc.? People may want to pay it but can't. I realize this is only private sector problem or question. Well, yeah, hopefully my points to Kelly is there. That's where just to be clear, it isn't me saying, well, if you can't afford it, you should take your disabling arthritic knee and just allow the world to swallow you up. Of course, that's not my point. I really want the social safety net to be able to support that sort of person. I'm just meaning that in when it comes to the market forces that can help to determine inherent value of individual clinicians and reputations and stuff, then that's where I'm saying that the market rate can determine the value. But yeah, for those that can't afford, so that's where I'll be straight with you. I want them to be appropriately supported with my tax that I've paid, and all of us have paid. Not just me. I'm just meaning that that's exactly what I think the state should provide provisions for. Provide provisions. Right, I need to go. I'm realizing I'm over time, but I love this topic and I love you all. And thank you so much for all your contributions. I'm sorry I've not been able to get to all of the comments as ever, but I did want to chew this over with you, and I feel we have been able to. I went off on one a little bit in the middle, so I hope you followed along, and I hope it wasn't anything too ranty. I'm really passionate about this topic, and it's something that you've been asking for a while in a few different guises. So I hope I've done it justice, and it definitely won't conclude today. So if any of you want to come on the show to discuss it in more detail, to unpack some of your comments, then please let me know. That's exactly what this is for. So come and join me as a guest, or continue to suggest specific topics, and we will cover them as they crop up. But for now, thank you. Have a great weekend. Have a great bank holiday weekend. And I'll see you. It'll be First Steps will be on Tuesday, and I'll see you on Wednesday. Really appreciate it, and I'll see you soon. All the best.